Hello and welcome to week 40 of the FUT Weekly podcast. We'll be digging into ShapeShifters content as well as plenty more on this episode, and we'll be doing it not with Josh and Japes this week because they're both away, but first of all with Richard Buckley, who is of course very much a regular around here, eWorld Cup commentator. It's good to have you on, Richard. Welcome.
Thank you very much, as always, Ben. Team season is over. We're getting into the summer now. And looking forward to chatting all things Ultimate Team.
Indeed. And representing the podcast community, I guess, we have Springford. Welcome back again to the podcast. It's good to have you on.
Thank you. Happy to be back with a little bit of European silverware from my club, West Ham United. I couldn't even, I thought I'm going to get out of the way now. I can't even wait 5 seconds without saying it. But
yeah. Well, to be fair, it was a while ago, but Bowen came very recently. So that's fun.
Yeah, and I actually got him in the upgrade thing. So that was nice as well.
You did?
So yeah, he's in a squad that I might never ever use, but he's at least there. So he's in the club.
Surely, could you manage a champs with West Ham players, surely, just about?
Yeah, because you got the 𝘭𝘰𝘐, who's pretty good. 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘐𝑃𝗏𝗏, do a little pass and present with Lampard. So yeah, you probably could do. And actually, I won't go into too much. The Bowen's a pretty good card. If you stick a hunter on him, like, he'll do a job. So yeah, had to mention it. Get out of the way. Come on, you irons. Let's talk some FIFA.
Yeah, maybe not the same kind of season for our next guest, but if it had been the other way around, I think it probably would have been a good season. We have 𝘵𝑆_James. Welcome back after a little while.
Why would you intro me like that? That's such pain, actually. It's a weird one, to be fair, because it is a bottle, I think, but it's not as bad of a bottle as it looks.
Yeah, it's a funny one where, actually, if the season had been the other way around, totally different story or narrative coming out of it. And yeah, still a very good season, isn't it? I don't know. Is it still too soon, Richard, to talk about Barnsley? Or
no comment, Ben.
Fair
no comment.
Enough, yeah.
No comment. Let's move on.
We'll move swiftly on. And yeah, let's get into ShapeShifters. Actually, before we do, a bit of Team of the Season review, I guess, because obviously we've had the whole of Team of the Season. Why don't we come to you, James, first? How have you found Team of the Season this particular year?
Yeah, I really like Team of the Season. They've done a lot this year with more packs. I think we've had a lot more access to like 85 times 10s, 85 times 30s and like the season rewards. So you've got a much higher chance this year than ever of packing a good TOTS.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's a good point. And what about you, Springford? How have you found it?
I've really enjoyed it. I think they've had some good ideas and then lacked some consistency with the ideas. I'm not a menu grinder, and I like said before, I don't really see that's not the part that I enjoy. But when they introduced that Matoma grind for the Premier League Team of the Season, I thought that was a really good idea because it made it simple for people and sort of structured the grind as well. So each milestone of 10 you complete, you get a good set of packs or you get a player back. And that was brilliant. And then they didn't do it again for any of the other Team of the Seasons. It's like they had a different theme for each one. Like Bundesliga, I think you unlocked like 4 different players through gameplay. And then for the Liga, you had no actual player SBCs, but just icon SBCs of icons that used to play in that league. So I think these are all really interesting ideas, but I'm not sure if they were executed as consistently as they could be. The cups are interesting. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more in champs about using a particular squad to get a certain set of rewards. Like if we had Prem the week before, then use your Prem squad to try and win rewards for your Bundesliga squad rewards or something. So I think that would have been quite interesting to see. But it's been a good promo. It's been a good promo. It's good for people to get access to high level cards through rewards or through, like James has said, through the amount of packs that you're able to grind out through objectives.
I think that's a really tough balance, though, because I tried to do the league earn team only for the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 and the 𝘵𝑚𝑏𝑎 card. And I literally didn't see a single other person doing it. Like, there was no one. It was just me getting battered with my terrible league earn team. It was a nightmare. Because that's the problem, I think, when you have league earn TOTS and you've got it in rewards, you just want to use your best team because you want to have the best chance of getting the 𝘵𝑚bappé, the Neymar, the Messi. And is it really worth grinding it with a worse team to get a red 𝘵𝘭𝘪𝘬 who probably doesn't go into your team anyway?
Yeah, I think that was, and we said at the time, a little bit strange the way they did that. If it had been the following weekend, so you'd had time to build up your League One side, that would have made more sense almost, because the quality of League One players at that point just, wasn't particularly amazing, especially if you were trying to use your players in your club or whatever, didn't have any coins to spend.
Yeah. because you could do the cup throughout the week to grind up some players for your squad, and then open packs throughout the week, and then take that squad in and then finish the weekend league. Say you finish the Prem weekend league, you get Prem players. You've been doing the cup throughout the week, you get Prem players in that, and then take that Prem squad into the following team of the season weekend league to try and get additional rewards there. But then I think it's always got to be a thing about, is the juice worth the squeeze? And like James has said, the 𝗵𝗀𝘀𝘀 probably wasn't. People weren't interested enough in doing that and didn't have as good enough team to be able to do it. And I think the wins was it 14 wins or 13 wins to
13,
get it? It was quite
it was,
a high. Yeah. There's quite a high number for a lot of players to try and reach. So I think they probably overshot on the on the rewards for that one.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Richard, what about you? Any thoughts on Team of the Season now it's all over?
I think it was good, and I enjoyed Team of the Season. I just think it was overshadowed by the errors in packs. Like the only thing I saw was people flying around the country, flying around the continent, trying to get to different countries to get packs. Like it sort of. I don't know, it was just strange towards the end. Like, everyone was just relying on these, like, elite packs coming out and hoping that they were wrongly worded. Like, no one actually cared, it seemed, what the SBCs was, just if the packs were incorrectly worded to get free players that people are still waiting for in compensation. It was a weird one. It tailored off very quickly. I think League and TOTS was so top-heavy, I want to say. Like, there was a lot of just meh at the bottom end that I think a lot of people lost interest really quickly, and then Ultimate TOTS just went by so fast.
Yeah, it did. And also the rewards, I mean, I know I've said many times on this podcast, don't play for rewards, but during Team of the Season, it is the pinnacle for red picks, and I've just found it incredibly disappointing, really. I mean, the value of the players that I got offered, having got 14 or 16 wins every week, felt way worse than in past cycles. And I know I'm not the only one as well. And you kind of think, look, if someone's willing to commit that hard to Team of the Season, to champs, you'd expect them to at least walk away with a player who is kind of a marquee red pick. I didn't get offered an attacker over 100k in value. And I don't think I was offered another player over 500k, I want to say. And, maybe this will be nice because it'll make people feel a bit better if they're in a similar situation, which I'm sure many people were. And so that was somewhat demotivating. But in terms of the overall package of Team of the Season, I think it was really strong. It just maybe lacked that cherry on the top for me personally. Although, yes, the content was a little inconsistent at times. I think they did that to try and keep it fresh, which worked to some extent, but actually it can feel like one particular week or a few particular weeks, you're just much less engaged in the content that's going on, whether it's the icon SBCs because you don't have that much fodder, it's not really going to work for your team, or it's maybe the crafting stuff that you're not so into. It maybe put people off in specific weeks. But then you did have the new XP system, which was really, really good. And I think overall, it certainly has been a good Team of the Season. It felt like they kept a bit in the tank, maybe, whether it's, Icon Team of the Seasons we could have had or Hero Team of the Seasons. And I think that's probably because they wanted to save it for post Team of the Season, which certainly makes sense considering what we've had with ShapeShifters. And that's what we're going to move on to talking about. And one thing about ShapeShifters, it feels quite stark when you compare it to Team of the Season, which is all about performance across the season, and ShapeShifters is just kind of ridiculous in terms of the players you get, like strikers at centre backs at striker, etc., etc. James, is that something that you think shouldn't really happen in FUT?
I love it. I think it's hilarious. I mean, I want to use 𝘬𝘰𝘃 at striker. I think that's really funny. And I think there is an issue with, there's people who think the game isn't realistic enough in some sense, but it is a video game at the end of the day. So when you have like these weird position changes where you're just playing players completely out of position, sometimes it works really well. Sometimes the stats, actually help the player in the new position, and sometimes it just feels like you're playing a centre-back at striker. But I don't mind it. It just means it's more varied, and that's the thing I want to see most. I want to see more varied teams and more like freedom of expression almost in your teams. I don't want to see 𝗵𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗀 every single game. It's just boring.
Yeah, it definitely helps with that kind of thing. Richard, what about you? Do you mind this kind of, I don't know, spicing it up in this way?
No, I've got no issue with it whatsoever, really. I think it enables people to, like James said, change the team. And for a lot of people have been using the same team for a very long time. Add a little bit of creativity in there, get a few players in that you might not have used before. And it also gives us unbelievable players in this like late period of the year, which are just a joy to play with, a lot of them.
Yeah. I think the fact that they can really freshen up the gameplay experience is what sells it to me. Like, I don't like the slightly unrealistic element to it, to be honest. It's not something that I have ever been a huge fan of, but actually considering when it's come in the cycle and the fact that some of these players really are incredibly unique from a gameplay perspective and feel very different to other players I've used, I think that makes it engaging. And I was saying the other week, in terms of what could engage me post Team of the Season, it would be having a new gameplay experience with players that are different to the ones I've used previously. And actually, in fairness to Shapeshifters, that's exactly what it's done, even if, you know, it does feel unrealistic. But yeah, I don't mind that in this context, I think. Springford, what about you finally?
So I'm going to come in. I've got a slight problem with it. Not massively from the modern day player perspective. I think, and it's not a fact that, you know, that it's not realistic or anything like that. I think it's good to get variety into the game in terms of the players that people are using. It gives more squad building options. My hangover on it is that if I pack, I mean, a good example of it was previously during one of the FUT birthday ones, and they made a left back Salah. And I know it's later in the game, so you could use Salah, but if I pack Salah, I want to use Salah as an attacking player, like, because I watch football, I like watching him play. I don't want to stick him in at left back and then have him playing there. And this is where my problem comes with it from the icon perspective. And I would say that with the icons, they've kind of restrained it slightly apart from like Rijkaard's a striker. But I mean, Pele's a left wing, Zambrotta's a centre mid, which, you know, it's not too far removed. They've put Hierro at right back. But a lot of the icons, and it comes from the problem that a lot of the icons versions are not good and are not usable in this state of the game. So, for example, like 𝘃𝘃𝗧𝗏, someone like that, there's a high likelihood that the best 𝘃𝘃𝗧𝗏 card we might get is not going to be an attacking player. So, from that perspective, if you're an Arsenal fan and you really want to use Henry, yeah, you might get enjoyment from, you know, seeing him play left back or something. But I think, from my perspective, the icons, I'd rather have more up-to-date versions of those that are usable in the game, that are in their natural positions, because then it gives that sort of nostalgic feeling of watching these players play, you know, or try to use them in the way that they used to play. Yeah,
it's a good point that they seem to have been somewhat aware of that by not doing that or not going too crazy with the icons. Like Rijkaard, you point out, is definitely the extreme example. The rest are all kind of somewhat realistic feeling. Even if, you know, I don't know, Van Persie has ridiculous strength, for example, on one of his versions, or Socrates has obviously really good defensive stats, which he doesn't typically have. But I can see why they would be a bit cautious about doing that for the reason you mentioned. And kind of hopefully that continues, I would say. Like, I would be saddened basically by Henry being, I don't know, the best right back in the game, for example, when his prime is so far behind the curve and has really never been particularly useful, I'd say. But in terms of engaging content post Team of the Season, seeing as that was a question I asked the other week, James, is this the kind of thing that does get you engaged, or are there other things that they could do which would keep you interested?
I think it is. I think it's this, because I think Richard made a good point where if I look at my FUT Champs team now, I could pack so many players from like the Team of the Season promos and they just wouldn't get in my team. Like, I just wouldn't bother changing my team to fit around them or whatever. But if for me personally anyway, like this Zambrotta SBC looks so good that I'd think, I want to play that centre mid. Then what do I need to do with my team to fit him in? Like, what do I need to move around in order to like actually play with him and try and experience this new card? I don't think, because like otherwise it's a lot of it's just straight swaps. Like, imagine if you had Salah from week 1 gold card, and then another Salah comes out, you just take the Salah out, put another Salah in. It's not, you're not changing much.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And actually, you know, we're starting to talk about the players already, so maybe it is a good time to jump into and do pound for pound powerhouse, which actually is going to be a good one this week. I think there are plenty of options and some really interesting players here. So let's get into it. I'll go for what is actually a slightly left field one from a listener here, and that is 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 with shapeshifter Thorgan Hazard. He says he costs just an 82 and 85 rated squad, which is around 70k. I brought him in as a super sub for champs, where he came on and grabbed a few late goals as an attacking left centre mid. Base card has great pace, solid shooting, and good defending stats, and he's one of those Swiss Army knife bench options. With his crown, he gets full chem, so managed to give him a decent run out at left back in playoffs, where he was absolutely solid. As an attacking fullback, can't join the attack, he contributes well in the attack. Got a few in the box goals with his decent shooting. Solid defensively, and with 92 stamina, can last the full game on press after possession loss. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, he does look really good and he's really cheap. So we can move into the nominations from people on the podcast, and James, as you're the least regular on the pod, you get to go first. So who would you like to take?
I think free is the best value you can get. I mean, it's not actually free. It does cost a lot of time and a lot of gold players. But Bamba, very solid right back card, and as well as getting him, I was going to say, you have the pleasure of crafting like 100 SBCs to then potentially get other things out. Like even worst case scenario, you're going to get a few walkouts to do some of the icon picks, hero picks, or whatever, and you might get something good out of that as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's a nice departure from grinding games where it's a really competitive atmosphere, and sometimes it can be very frustrating when you lose. Whereas this is, nothing can go wrong. Well, I say that I've put a lot of expensive players into SBCs in the past by accident. Not much can go wrong.
I mean, you should get the value back in terms of fodder, at least, you would have thought. And actually, Springford, you rattled through it, didn't you? Because you were waiting in an airport and ended up completing the entire thing while you waited. So how did it go?
I mean, it wasn't anything to write home about. I'm very much not a menu grinder. I don't do it usually. I don't really understand it. It's one of those things that goes in one ear and out the other in terms of what SBCs I'm meant to be putting into what. But what I do is save pretty much all of my gold and common cards unless I'm putting them into upgrades. So it meant I could do around 35, I think, without having to start going into any of the other upgrades to start producing them. I like things when they're structured in terms of I like an objective that tells me do this and get this. And then when they put out the menu grind into an objective, I think it works really well. But I mean, I think I got my shifter was 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, who is actually very good. And then I got the Europa Conference winners 𝘵𝘰𝘬𝘦, the man of the match, which obviously is nice for me, maybe not nice for anyone else. And then a little bit of high-rated fodder, but I think I was probably just quite unlucky in the actual rewards, because the rewards are good for it. But yeah, I did not get much back.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I actually did get a player back that I was using in my squad. I'll be nominating him for pound in a second, so I won't spoil it now, just in case someone nabs him. But he's, I think, going to revolutionise the centre-back position as we know it in the game at the moment, and maybe improve gameplay overall, which is a big claim. But anyway, Springford, you go ahead and give us your pound nomination.
Okay, so I'm going to go for someone that I've brought into my team because he looks incredible. I'm going for the right back, shapeshifter icon Hierro. He is basically a better 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘀 𝗏𝘂 for 40k. I mean, I bought him at 80, so I've lost coins on him, but I would have paid like double that for him, really, if not more. He gets max pace with a shadow. He's 6'2". High work rate, so I use him as my stay back right back in my formation. But he's got 94 dribbling, which is kind of crazy on a 6'2" player, like 91 agility, 99 balance, high 90s reaction, with low 90s reaction and composure. Passing's really good as well, so he can pass out of defence. He gives icon links to Sergio Busquets as well, who's a really good midfielder. So I think for 40k, you can't get much better as a stay back right back.
Yeah, I think that's a good nomination. I've used him quite a bit now, actually, because I packed him, and yeah, he's extremely solid. Like, I actually was looking at my club, and I don't think I have a better untradeable right back, which says a lot, considering the number of fullbacks I seem to have gained over team of the season. And his technical stats are really, really, really good for anyone who hasn't looked at them. Right. Who are you going to go for, Richard? There's a couple of players still, I think, that deserve a mention.
It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but for the value of player that you are getting, he is the ultimate endgame centre mid. I'm going for Socrates, the shapeshifter icon. 700k. He is arguably 2 maybe midfielders better than him on the game. 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝘸, team of the year and team of the year team of the season 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝘀, and then he fits nicely in third. A lot of pro players. Socrates straight in the team. He is just unbelievable. I've used him myself. He feels incredible on the ball. He can defend. He's tall. He's physical. He's got pace. He really is just the ultimate centre mid. And I don't know if his pack weight has been like really messed up, or EA didn't expect him to be as good as he is, because it blows my mind that he's like 700,000 coins for a player that should be like 2 mil. Just a remarkable player that's been released. He's the highlight of Shapeshifters Team 1, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, is he actually maybe even better than 𝘰𝘰𝘀𝘁? Like, I was looking at the stats and was thinking, I'm pretty sure Socrates has him beaten on everything but shooting, maybe?
I think 𝘰𝘰𝘀𝘁, I don't know, 𝘰𝘰𝘀𝘁 feels different.
Still different, yeah.
Like, yeah, but he is in that category. I was watching Stokes. A lot of people were asking Stokes his opinion on him, and he said he is the top 3. You can have him in any order, but he is now competition for those 2, Bellingham and 𝘰𝘰𝘀𝘁, which I think is a sort of a bigger, like, it speaks more than I can say when people are saying, yeah, throughout all of Team of the Season, this player is better than everything else that got released in that midfield position.
Yeah.
Just incredible, really.
Yeah. And I'm saying, maybe he's better, maybe he's not. But the point is, there's like, 7 million coins different, and he's in the conversation. That's crazy. A great mention there. And the player I was going to say, there's a couple definitely that could still be mentioned here, but 𝗵𝗀 is just kind of stupid. Like, I'm not really sure. Well, I can see why they released him. Obviously, they want to put good players out there for people to use, but I'm surprised they made him kind of so readily packable, because if you put a shadow on him, he has, max pace. I mean, it's 98 acceleration, 99 sprint speed, and he's lengthy by default, which makes him the fastest lengthy centre-back in the game. He's got 95 strength, 91 aggression. He's got maxed out defensive stats, apart from 97 defensive awareness. He's got 94 jumping, 91 stamina, 90 reactions. His dribbling stats aren't amazing, but they're good enough. He's got 85 composure. Passing, not fantastic. 83 short passing. Maybe you want a bit higher at this point, but he's got high defensive work rates, medium attacking. I used him throughout champs, and he was just a god. Like, honestly, I'm so glad he's been released, because finally you can keep pace with all those annoying lengthy attackers. Like, it was really funny just seeing people wondering what had happened as 𝗵𝗀 caught Kane. It was probably the first time they'd had someone match Kane for pace ever, because there are just literally no lengthy centre-backs as fast as him on the game. So for 70k, it is ridiculous, because you can also just get him on full chem. Like, he's one of the shapeshifter hero style cards, which has the 3 chem points, and obviously gives an extra chem point to Bundesliga players, which is nice. And it's nice to see them do that, actually. I thought that was worth a mention, because someone like 𝗵𝗀, I mean, he's already super cheap, but he'd be even cheaper if he was unable to get chemistry apart from Surinamese and Bundesliga players and Union Berlin, which is a little tricky. So, great to see them doing that, and he's just stupidly good. Is there anyone wants to mention that they've used or feel is worthy of a shout out that doesn't necessarily have to be pound for pound nominated?
I think that 𝘭𝘪𝘀𝘁 really good, and this isn't me coping because I got him from my Shapeshifters pack. He comes out at like a base. I mean, I know the base ratings aren't, you don't look into too much, but I think he's like a 95 right winger, and he doesn't have a bad stat on him. Like, the only downside about him maybe is his defending, but you put a powerhouse on him, he could easily run that midfield. He has the extra chemistry link. It doesn't do as much as I thought it would, like the premium footies like last year, but I know it's not footies, but he has a bit of extra chemistry about him. He links into Medina, who I haven't used, but I've heard is very, very good. and then give some extra League One chemistry. He's been brilliant for me. I'm going to try and work a way to actually get him in full time. He can play pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, it's funny when I saw him, I was like, oh, that's nice. The Lewandowski-Medina connector, essentially, isn't he? Because he's Polish and also plays for Lens, but he also gets full chem anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah.
I've got one more as well.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
For anyone who's adopted the 5-back, 𝘵𝘃𝗬𝘏, CDM into centre-back, unbelievable. Just, I think with an anchor, he's a 98 centre-back when I was having a little look at him. Just remarkable player. And I wouldn't use him too far going forward. I think CDM's probably his furthest forward to put him. But as a third centre-back, he is remarkable.
And another player I was going to mention, I'm not sure I'd say he's pound for pound powerhouse worthy because he's quite expensive, but Upamecano is quite a lot of fun. Like, I wouldn't say he's like super effective just because his build makes him not amazing on the ball, but when you put a Guardian, I think it is, on him, it boosts his defensive stats by quite a lot, including +8 defensive awareness, which gets it to 80. His stand tackle goes up to 93, and his dribbling stats get improved quite a bit as well. And he's actually a very viable kind of box-to-box centre mid at that point, which is kind of ridiculous considering the rest of his stats for that position, because he's got 97 short passing and 99 strength, 95 aggression, 99 jumping, near maxed out dribbling stats, basically apart from 88 agility. Really good shooting too. So he's someone that I think, if you need him for chemistry or you want to have a bit of fun with a really big 5-star skiller, he's someone that I think is worth completing, but not amazing value, so he's good. Anyone from you, James, finally? I don't know if you've used anyone.
No, I mean, I was going to mention Upamecano as well, actually, because I have used him. He does feel a bit big.
Yeah.
He's not like the agile cam that you want for the 5-star skiller, but he is very strong to compensate for that. So I think I've been playing him as a wide cam in the 4-2-3-1. And when he goes down the wing, it's very hard for people to get the ball off him again because he just pushes them off.
Yeah, he's someone that I've seen people playing at wing back because in a 3 and 5 at the back, you don't necessarily need the super high defensive stats, and he's a really strong runner. He's got the 5-star skills. His distribution's really good. So I think that actually kind of makes sense. And it's nice to have a player who can move from centre mid to wing back for kind of flexibility reasons, I guess, if you're changing formations. Just in terms of the other players we've had, there are plenty of good value options, as we've been talking about, but there are also some extremely expensive ones like Van Dijk, who's like 5 million. You've also got Mahrez, who's like 2 million coins, and Bruno Fernandes is a few million too. But the likes of Depay look actually reasonable. I mean, they're like 500k, Depay and Rudiger, but both look kind of outstanding actually in their own right. I mean, Rudiger, probably one of the best strikers we've had this cycle, you could say, if you're interested in the 5-star weak foot rather than the 5-star skills, because he's 5-star weak foot, 4-star skills. He's lengthy, basically looks like a better Harry Kane. Depay may be one of the better 5-star skill box-to-box midfielders. It is interesting, and it kind of got me thinking, James is someone who I know played champs throughout Team of the Season. Is there a danger maybe with Shapeshifters that sort of devalues the grind you've been going through over the last couple of months, or maybe even the cycle?
I think it's kind of it's a tricky one because it is, yes, but I think it's a perpetual problem with constant promos, because if you release a new promo and it's not as good or better than the previous promo, then no one cares, right? So it's a tough medium between making things new and exciting and not devaluing the day of work you just did for FUT champs.
I'm kind of caught in two minds about this, because on the one hand, it is a big jump in the power curve relative to the price of a lot of these players. But on the other hand, that's sort of what you need, I suppose, to keep people playing at this point, is to offer people things that they can obtain relatively straightforwardly. Otherwise, they're probably going to drift off because they've done enough grinding over the course of the cycle, and maybe there are new players joining and you need to be able to catch them up, because every opponent they play will probably have a ridiculously good team. So I guess there's lots of things to consider. Interested to know what listeners think of that though, and what they'd like to see post Team of the Season, which we'll talk a bit about next. And also we'll be speaking about chemistry. We'll do that after this slightly late break. Hello, listeners. Allow me a little bit of a ramble here, because we're heading towards what is FIFA's endgame. I mean, not just the end game for FIFA 23, but FIFA entirely. So if you have any thoughts on potentially different topics we could cover over the summer, especially because it's the end of FIFA as we know it, then, please do send in any questions you might have, any topics you want covering, maybe ideas for guests you would like to come on the podcast for a discussion too. Always definitely open to any suggestions listeners might have, and you can send those in via all the usual ways, footweekly@mail.com and @FootWeeklyPodcast on Twitter. @FootWeeklyBen is my Twitter, and you can do the little Q&A thing on Spotify, comment on YouTube, really any way that's easiest for you to get in touch with any topics, any guests, anything along those lines, and look forward to seeing those. And if you would like more Foot Weekly content, including past Foot Weekly content, we've got some specials from previous summers, which are still very much relevant. That Connection episode went down really well. People have improved their gameplay experience massively because of that. So do check those out, and you can go to Support Foot Weekly, just search that in Google, and it'll take you to Patreon, where you can sign up for just £3 a month. You'll be supporting the podcast, keeping it going, and if you do consider doing that, then that is greatly appreciated. And let's jump into the rest of this podcast. Hello, welcome back, and we'll talk actually again about Team of the Season and rewards more specifically, because we now know that the changes have happened to champs that we normally get after Team of the Season, which changes the schedule back to before Team of the Season, so it no longer spills into early the following week. I'm not sure why they change it back. It feels quite odd. I mean, switching the scheduling so that the whole thing happens a bit earlier, again, I could see why they do that, but actually reducing the number of hours, it always seems a bit strange to me, and a bit backwards that they do that for the final few months when presumably people are less likely to be engaged. I don't know, maybe there's some matchmaking reason because they're trying to concentrate matches within the window of champs, which I guess is the reason it's a weekend league in the first place. But the other thing is that the rewards have changed, and they've gone to EFIG, so England, Spain, France, Germany, major 5 leagues, and Italy, of course, major 5 leagues, and they're 91 plus, which doesn't rule out that many bad Team of the Season players, to be honest. And I guess it's something, Richard. I don't know. I know you're a committed champs player. What you make of that?
Well, this last weekend, I actually completely sacked off my aspiration of getting a good reward and did the Liga NOS and Serie A objective. So I sort of did it. I looked at it and thought, I get 20 85 plus players guaranteed if I win 4 games with Liga NOS, 4 games with Serie A. And I managed to get, I think I got 13 wins in the end. My Liga NOS team was awful. So I got ranked 5 plus all the objective packs from that side of it as well.
Right, yeah.
So it was sort of I don't mind, now the aspiration for getting good rewards is sort of died a little bit. I would happily sacrifice a chunk of champs rewards to do additional objectives in champs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't mind playing with the Liga NOS players I've never used before. 𝘬𝘃𝑚𝑖, bit of a unit up top. I had his Team of the Season back in the cupboards of the club. He got pulled out for a few games. It made it different. It was enjoyable.
Yeah. So that you actually enjoyed the kind of challenge of playing with a different team.
I didn't mind it.
Yeah, I'd like to see them do that too, actually. I think that kind of integration, at this point in the cycle, as you say, is quite good, especially with maybe that's the advantage of the rewards not looking appealing necessarily. I mean, they're still good, obviously. You're still going to get some good quality players in there. If you do it each week to 11 wins or 9 wins, whatever, there's still going to be kind of ticking over with decent TOTS players coming out. But I guess there's more incentive to go off and try some of these objectives if they continue to do them. So yeah, it's a good shout. Quite like to see them in playoffs as well, actually. I think adding some more spice to playoffs at this point is quite good for us players who kind of, will get a decent number of wins in there anyway. I think that can be good. And kind of on this topic, actually, James, yourself, I guess you're going to be continuing to stay engaged with FUT. So are there particular things that you'd like to see? Anything that tends to keep you involved at this point in the cycle?
I'm ashamed to admit I attempted to do what Richard did and didn't realise you needed a full squad and not just a starting 11.
Oh, no.
So I wasted a bunch of games.
Oh, you didn't check whether it was counting?
No, I didn't. I think I played 2 games. I think I played 4 games, 1-2, lost it. And I checked and went, look, I've done 0. And I went, do you know what? I put the pad down and thought, that's me for the week and I'm going to take a break and go outside.
Well, if they do do them in future and you don't cock up, would you consider continuing to do that?
It is tough because the gap between my main team and those kind of teams, and I'm not as good of a player as Richard, so it's not as easy for me to like guarantee to do it. So I might end up sacrificing like 11 or 9 wins and then end up getting like 4 or 5 if I'm really using a bad team to play.
Yeah.
So it's a really tricky thing of whether I just use my good team, make sure I get 11, but then I'm getting like 91 plus 𝘵figs. But I would definitely be on the side of more packs. I love opening packs. It's like one of my vices of this game. Mm-hmm. The more packs, the better. It's why I really loved like just the swaps that have been going throughout the year. I think it's been fantastic. And I hope they do it more next year as well. Like just objective grinds, SBCs, and all the stuff to get tokens to open more packs. It's just great. Yeah.
And do you like the new system for swaps through the season objectives and XP?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think I was glad they released this big batch of like, you get 1,000 XP for each one, because I was a bit daunting to look at like level 40 and I'm so far away and I don't know, like I can't get any more XP like because I'd finished all the current objectives. But they've released loads now, and so yeah, it's great. And the rewards, like they've updated, I think, the season rewards really well in that they give you the option, instead of just being storyline players, it's would you like a pack? Or would you like 𝘃𝗲𝘀𝘀𝘀, for example?
Yeah, that makes sense. And the final thing I was going to ask you, James, while you're here, is about chemistry, because obviously you're involved in chemistry-related content creation, I guess, to some extent. I mean,
yes,
you've been a regular on Squad Builder Showdown, which, if people don't know, is AJ3 or Andy's series that he does, which revolved around really the chemistry system as it existed previously. I'm sure we'll get him on at some point over the summer and he'll probably talk about this himself. But it is interesting, the change to chemistry for his series particularly. It's changed how it works. But actually just kind of more generally, as well as from a content perspective, what are your thoughts on the chemistry system this cycle?
I thought it was confusing at first, but it's, as all new things are, you kind of just got to get used to it. I prefer it to the old one in the sense that it makes your team more flexible. Because previously, I mean, not 𝘬𝘦𝘱 necessarily, but like 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 was just a thing everyone saw every weekend, because not only were they really good players, they got chem, and if you didn't have those two next to each other, it'd be really hard to get chem, or more difficult, maybe not that hard, to get chem for those two players and have an as good defense. Whereas now you can play 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 and then play Benzema up top if you've got a team of the year Benzema, and then they'll both be almost on full chem. I think it has still got some balancing issues, particularly with the icons. Like this year, I think is the first year where the heroes have just been significantly better than icons, just because they give you chemistry, and icons, it's really hard. Like 𝘵𝘃, 𝘊𝑔𝑙𝑖𝑠ℎ, icons historically have been really highly sought after, really good value, have just sort of fallen off because unless you have a full chem team other than them, they're not really contributing anything to your club anymore.
Yeah, whenever this has come up on the podcast, that's been something that's just unanimously agreed. I'm not even sure how icon chemistry as it is even made it into FIFA 23, right? It's just kind of mad when you think about it, that they are so useless. I mean, they give less contribution than a normal player. Like, it's 2 for nation that icons give, and a regular player gives 1 for club, 1 for nation, 1 for the league. So it is bizarre. But actually, from a promotion perspective, if you like, I'm surprised we didn't see promo icons like ShapeShifters given different chemistry, considering they're able to do this seemingly for random players like the 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀, for example. Could have done that for shapeshifter icons, surely. And we haven't seen it. And I do think that's one of the great things about this system, is that they can just tweak the numbers very granularly if they want to make players more useful for chemistry and switch things up. They could have a player give 5 randomly to nation or league or something. So there is potential there. Stringfoot, what about you? Are you wishing that the old system returned, or?
Definitely not wishing that the old system still existed. I mean, there are obviously moments where you look at your squad and you're like, well, my left back and my, because I've got a red 𝘃𝘊𝘬𝘦 and a red 𝘃𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀, so that would be a link there, done and dusted. But now I've got to put in like extra players, and I think it's It's definitely an improvement. I just think they need to iron out some of the creases. Like James has said about the icon chemistry, it needs to be giving more to players, because you can have 2 Brazilian icons, I think, and still not have enough to get a Brazilian player on full chem. And then I don't like how it scales up. I don't really see why it does that in terms of, like, I think, I can't remember the specifics, but the first rank might take 2 players from a certain nation to give chemistry, and the next rank gives 3. It makes it harder the more players you want to put in to do it. But I definitely think it's an improvement. They just need to iron out some of these creases, because I think the problem was when it was introduced, people said, oh, it won't matter towards the end of the game because players will be so boosted. It doesn't matter about trying to get full chemistry on them. But we still haven't quite reached that part. Like, maybe for like the really high level players, you don't want them on full chemistry, but there's always going to be a competitive advantage to getting the players on chemistry. So that's what you're going to be looking for. So I think they need to, just make the links slightly less taxing and less easy. I think I can get 4 Milan players into a squad and only just get full chem on them, which just doesn't seem right. So I think they just need to work on that aspect of it.
Yeah, 2 really good points raised there, actually. I was thinking the way that it changes and increases and steps up feels quite harsh, as you say, going from 2 to 3, but also the fact that actually League is 3 and then 2, and I think that's a little confusing. I'd like it either all to step up in the same way, or it's just, a flat number of players required for each chem point, no matter how many chem points you're looking at. And I think there are some simplifying changes they could make, because while it is definitely simpler than before, when Chris was on the podcast, he started FUT for the first time, having played it a long, long time ago, very briefly, he was quite clear that the new chemistry system is much more straightforward, but I think they could probably go further. And also your point about chemistry still being important even now, despite the fact that people said, you'd play players off chem and all this sort of stuff. Chemistry is just too much of a boost. And I think I was saying to the time, before the cycle started and we knew about the chemistry system, that actually chemistry was probably going to remain really quite important, considering how big that boost you get from chemistry actually is. But as always, really keen to hear any listener thoughts on this topic, because we'll definitely give it a more thorough going over at some point in the summer. So keep an ear out for that, and do get in touch with any thoughts on it. And also keep an ear out for this week's gameplay episode, which is the supporter exclusive podcast. I've got a new tactic, which is honestly the most fun I've had with a tactic in FIFA 23, and it's actually really quite effective too, and isn't a tactic or a formation I've seen many people, if any, use actually. So looking forward to talking about that on the Gameplay Podcast supporter episode. If you're a supporter, you can check it out on the supporter feed. If you're not yet a supporter and would like to support the pod, get an extra podcast every single week, including that Gameplay Podcast, then you can just head over to the Patreon. Just search Support FUT Weekly in Google and you'll find it, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. But it's time now to say our goodbyes. So, James, it's been great to have you back on the pod. Where can people find you?
Pleasure, as always. I am on YouTube as 𝗵𝘀𝗻𝑠.
Great. And James will be on the Gameplay Pod, and so will Springford, sharing a tactic he got 18 wins and champs with. But for now, thank you very much for coming on the Content Pod.
No, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Nice. And we have also had Richard Buckley, as always. Yeah, a pleasure to have you on the pod.
Thank you very much. You can find me on all social media at 𝑟buckley98.
Good stuff. A reminder, you can subscribe via all the different podcast platforms, but also if you're on YouTube currently, then definitely do subscribe to FUT Weekly on YouTube, because we're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, which we're aiming to hit hopefully before EA FC 24, considering the podcast has only been being uploaded to YouTube frequently this cycle, and it's great to see. And thank you if you've been catching the podcast on YouTube, and don't forget to leave a like, drop a comment, of course. It really does help out.